Welcome to Beginning Ham Radio. We're sponsored by the Portland Amateur Radio Club, and tonight we're going to talk a little bit about digital modes like FT8, PSK31. All right, so for those of you who are new to ham radio, there are a ton of digital modes, especially in the last 15, 20 years. Tonight we're going to talk about just a couple of them. A lot of them, such as the JT65 in the upper right-hand corner, is something that was used a lot a few years ago, probably 5, 6 years ago, but it's been replaced by other modes like the FT8. So some of the more popular ones that are still being used today, RIDI, Paktor, PSK31, which we'll talk about a little bit today, Olivia, and FT8, which seems to be all the rage in HF and some VHF work, not only contest, but also just general ham radio operating and making contacts throughout the world. All right, so question is, why would you want to use digital versus voice or CW, which is Morse code? CW is a great skill to have. It's a great mode. Essentially, you're encoding and decoding the original digital mode with the computer between your ears. But a lot of people don't like to learn CW or Morse code. So digital modes, yes, you'll have to add a computer or a tablet or some other thing to decode and encode your digital signal, but it just makes it very easy to have some of the same advantages that CW operators have. It also cuts through the QRM and QRN, and that those are Q codes. For the QRM is interference or static made by that's man-made, and this could be something like a wall wart that you have plugged in, or LED lights that are emitting RF radiation that's interfering with your radio operation. QRN is the same type of thing, except it's coming from a natural things. So another advantage of digital is that you can really get on the air in minutes. A lot of people who do get their amateur radio license, especially if you upgrade to general or you use the 10-meter HF band, you can actually get on in just a few minutes and start making contacts throughout the world. In general, the equipment is pretty low cost. There are a couple of extra pieces that you need beyond what you would use for single sideband or voice, but it's actually not an exorbitant cost. You can use low power to talk around the world, so you don't need an amplifier. You don't need more than about 100 watts in general. And this is the one thing that I think is really great, is it's good for compromise antennas. If you're stuck in an HOA and you can't put up a tower, or if you go up and hike on to a mountain, you're probably not going to want to drag your tower along with you. So a lot of people who go on these summits on the air, the SOTA activations, they bring pretty efficient small antennas, such as wire antennas that they can just throw up really quickly into a tree. So it's not the best antenna, but it's one that you can carry in your backpack. And digital modes work really well with that because they don't necessarily have to be the best antenna to get your signal out. There are fewer lids, and a lid is kind of an acronym, or not an acronym, a jargon word for people that get on the air and they behave poorly. These are people who like to interfere with other people. And you will, if you spend any time in ham radio, start to notice there are some people that just can't help themselves be bad operators. A lot of times people do like Morse code or digital modes just because it's a lot less to deal with. People giving their personalities or people who want to spread their political propaganda. The other nice thing about digital modes is it is in general a narrower bandwidth than many of the other modes. In the upper right hand corner, you can see the graph there where they have CW, which is Morse code, single sideband, which is voice, AM, which is another voice mode, and FM. And you can see the bandwidth there. And CW, you can see, has the narrowest bandwidth. Single sideband, even though it's smaller than AM and FM, it still occupies about 300 hertz, which is quite a bit. And there's another slide that I'll kind of come back to this. But if you take a look at that CW in comparison to single sideband, you can probably fit about 15 or so Morse code communications in one single sideband communication bandwidth. So what do you need to get started with digital modes? In general, you're going to need a computer, a transceiver, and then something to tie them together. A lot of people, they'll use an external interface such as this signal link to tie the computer to the transceiver. There are some transceivers. Yaesu makes one, the FT991, that has the interface built into the radio. It makes the radio a little bit more expensive, but it also makes it, just one less thing that you have to buy to plug in between your computer and transceiver.
All the ICOM radio that have been coming for the last, I don't know, 5-6 years, they all have the interface built in. So you just need to have a USB cable and plug your computer on the radio. That's all.
Yeah, that makes it really easy.
Yeah.
And it does add a little bit of cost to the radio. However, I think the more people get into digital, it's almost like you buy your radio and then you're going to have to go buy an interface. So it just makes sense that ICOM would include it.
I think now all the manufacturers, they're going to include that because there is a lot of pressure for Electra, for example, to do the same thing because everyone is doing FT8 now, and everyone is asking for built-in interface.
Yep, it's definitely less wires, which is nice. So on the right-hand side, you can see just some examples of digital interface if you do have a radio that doesn't have one built in. And on the left-hand side, there's even like just a diagram of one that you can actually build yourself. The other thing I'd like to mention is that on eBay, they sell a lot of kits that look like something on the left-hand side for $10, $15. They'll give you all the parts, you just have to solder them together. So the sound card interfaces, what do? Well, they allow the software that you're running on your computer to toggle between the receive mode and the transmit mode. It also contains isolators to prevent ground loop, which is essentially if you have two appliances like your computer and your radio that are sharing the same ground, sometimes you can get some feedback on that interferes with the audio that's being sent and received to the radio. It can contain a dedicated sound card, which makes it a little bit easier sometimes to set up on your computer. It gives you a sound card that's built for digital communications rather than trying to use the one that's built into your computer. You can independently adjust audio levels. This will be important just to make sure that you're not overdriving the audio being sent to the radio, which will cause spatter and interference on your signal and make it harder for people to receive your signal, which is definitely not what you want.
Max, just one comment here. You really want to use a different sound card. You can use the sound card in your computer. You can plug the audio output to your radio and then use that. But it's a bad idea because if you have a video playing or music playing or the computer making a beep beep noise because you click on the mouse and you do a lot of things at the same time, all those things, they're going to go on the air, so you don't want that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, every once in a while you will hear YouTube videos being played on the frequencies where digital modes are being done. One of the last things, if you do end up buying a like the SignalLink USB, which is probably one of the more popular sound card interfaces, you can then buy the specific cables that come with it for your radio. And I think the next, I'm going to skip one slide here real quick. So here's an example of the Yaesu FT450D, which is a popular entry level. I actually kind of like it. I still have one HF radio, and you can get the supplied data cable connection that connects right into the SignalLink, and then they also will supply a USB cable, although many of us have a ton of those hanging around. And this is what kind of happens. So between your computer and your audio interface, which the SignalLink does contain a sound card, you'll have a digital signal going from through the USB to the SignalLink. But then from the SignalLink to the transceiver, you'll have an audio cable that goes between there. You'll also have some other cable usually that will signal the transceiver to receive versus transmit. In general, I would say that a setup like this is fairly easy to get up and running very quickly. There's a lot of YouTube videos and even on the SignalLink website, which is I think tigertronics.com, they'll have kind of a walkthrough in how to set up your different radios. So you will need some software on your computer or other smart device, such as your tablet or your phone. There is a ton of software. Most of it, I would say, is free, and the popular ones for Windows and Mac is going to be your WSJTX and FLDG. I've seen, other people use like MixW, but Fred, do you have any comments on like the popular software?
Yeah, it's FLDG and WSJT. You have if you are doing contests so contesting in general is on RTTY, and there is a special software for contesting or RTTY. But if you want to have fun on digital mode, it's going to be FLDG or WSJT for FT8 and FT4 and all those things.
Yeah, the nice thing about WSJTX is that it is multi-platform. So if you're going to use it on Linux or you're going to use it on Mac, you don't have to run emulator software for that. And so this is the waterfall, and this what we're looking at really is the different types of digital signals over time. And what it's showing us really is the bandwidth. So the wider the blue lines horizontally, the bigger or the wider the bandwidth is required. And so my point of comparison is there's Morse code here.
No, this is my opinion. People go, like when I was coming back, I went over to Rusty's to pick up a stuff.
So the third one from the left is Morse code. And you can see it's a very thin line. Unfortunately, I didn't find one with SSB, but it would be fairly large if you were to look at it here. JT9 is very similar to JT8, and so you can see that compared to Morse code, which takes up just a little bit of a tiny slice of bandwidth, a lot of the digital modes take up that same small bandwidth. So as far as power out, digital modes usually require less power to make a contact than, for example, single sideband or voice. So what you could do with 100 watts or 500 watts of voice communication, you could easily do with anywhere from 1 watt to 30 watts. Fred, let me know what you think, but in general, if you are running 100 watts or more using some of these digital modes, you may be better off getting a bigger antenna or better antenna because in general, digital modes don't take that much power.
Digital, they don't take that much power because they're more, it's like Morse code, they're way more efficient than voice. But there is something is that you need to be careful when if your radio is 100 watts, you need to be careful when you're running your if you're running digital, you don't want to transmit 100 watt because your radio doesn't have 100% duty cycle. So you may end up frying your radio if you run too much power. So usually you run around 30 watts on the 100 watt radio.
Yeah, that's a good point. I did take that slide out, but one thing to keep in mind, yeah, digital modes, they are, as Fred mentioned, 100% duty cycle, which means that when you're transmitting, your transmitter is on the entire time you're transmitting. So one of the first digital modes was RTTY. This is radio teletype. So back in the 1910s, 1920s is kind of when companies started to create a method by which they could transmit text from one point to another, either through dedicated wires and then later through the RF ether, or by transmitting and receiving through radio. So RTTY, it's one of the oldest popular modes. For ham radio, it actually started to become a thing in the 40s after World War II, when the Model 28 started to become available as military surplus. So this was definitely not more of a mechanical thing than an electronic, but it was something that people, the ham radio people, started working on to make it possible to transmit text messages, essentially early text messages, from one point to another, from one point to many points. In later years, like when I first got into ham radio, I purchased a Cantronics CAM, which was a modem, not like a sound card, but this was actually what encoded and decoded the digital signal and then fed it to the computer as text. It's not needed anymore because a lot of these software, it's all done in software inside the computer. So RTTY in general is a popular contesting mode even today after so many years of use. It's excellent in crowded conditions, but it's not great for weak signals. And it runs about 60 words a minute or 45 baud. And I have just these sound clips for some of these modes that will give you an idea of what they sound like, because as amateur radio operators, when you're tuning across the band and you hear voice and Morse code, those are really easy to decode or to say, oh yeah, I know what that is. But there's some other weird noises that are on the ham radio bands that you may be like, oh, what's that? Over time, you'll actually become really good at picking out not necessarily every single mode, like the difference between JT65 and JT8. You're not going to be able to figure that out. But RTTY versus PSK31 versus FT8 is a little bit easier to figure out. So here's what this one sounds like. And I'm going to reshare just to make sure that, yeah. Not that one though, because I think I don't have the sound coming through. And what you can hear from that is that RTTY is made of two tones, and that's what you hear is that warbling back and forth between those two tones. So PSK31 was kind of, I remember when it was about the time it was released in 1999, it was kind of the new thing. And in the early 2000s, it became very popular. This was one of the first modes that you were able to talk longer distances or communicate further. And it gave people who didn't know Morse code kind of this almost the same advantage. It's phase shift keying, which means that it's using the phase of the radio signal to indicate the different letters. Very high level, non-technical way of describing it. There's many other flavors of PSK31. There's PSK63, 125, 250. But for whatever reason, PSK31 became and probably is the more popular ones of the phase shift keying type digital modes. It's still used today. It's probably not quite as popular as FT8 is. And there are a few differences. One of them that I've noticed when I first started using PSK31 is that it is definitely a macro mode, meaning that when you get on the air and you start making contacts, you may notice that the people that you're making contacts with say the same thing over and over again. You can hear people making contacts with other people before you make contact with them, and they'll have these macros that they send out. So rather than typing in their contact information and their information about their computer and the weather and stuff, they put those all into macros so that on the operator side, when it's ready for you to transmit your message, a lot of people, they'll just put, hit F8 or F6 or whatever, and it will transmit that canned message.
I can show a demo of that after,
yeah.
if you want.
Okay, yeah, that'd be awesome. And on the bottom portion of the screen here is it's called a pan adapter, and it gives you a wide view of a slice of spectrum. And in this case, it looks like a 35 or a 3.5 kilohertz or 3,500 hertz. And each of these vertical bars here in red and yellow is a PSK31 signal. So the cool thing about some of these digital modes is because they take up such small bandwidth, what is coming out of the speaker of your radio actually could be, 10, 20 different people or different signals. So sometimes it gets crowded, sometimes not, but what your computer is doing is it's not listening necessarily to the entire bandwidth that you see in your pan adapter, but it's homing in on just one of these signals.
So Max, if you look at the numbers above the pan adapter, it's graded from 0 to 3.4 kilohertz. So 3 kilohertz is the SSB bandwidth.
Yeah.
So in one SSB bandwidth, look how many signal you can put, and you can put more because there is space in between of each of them.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is definitely not a view of what field day would look like, but this is like maybe a typical night, maybe even a weekday or weekend night when you do have quite a few, but there's definitely room for more. So PSK31 would sound like this. So it kind of has a little bit of a warbly sound, and what you were listening to was really just one PSK31 signal. When you listen to them all at once, like if you were to tune your radio and this is how many people were on, it would kind of sound like that, but just multiplied by 15 different sounds, all at different pitches. I put Olivia up here. It's not necessarily a popular mode, but I have not tried it yet, but it's an interesting mode. One of the things that makes it so interesting is that your computer is able to listen to or hear and copy a signal that you can't even hear. So when we listen to the tones on the previous page of PSK31, you could definitely hear that it was a man-made tone. But your computer can actually decode an Olivia signal when all you hear is static.
So Olivia is not that unpopular. There is nets that are running on Olivia, and also it's a lot of people that are foreign. They don't speak very well English. They use Olivia to make contacts because Olivia is super slow. It's really slow. So they can type, change their mind, change few words, go back and type again, and they can, that's why it's popular for people that want to make contact with the US and they don't know very well English.
Yeah, that's a good point. So as you're typing your message out, a a lot of programs, they'll show like the letters that were sent. But if you are using a mode that's pretty slow and sending slowly, you can actually, backspace, correct it, and then, keep typing because it hasn't sent it yet. So Olivia, I don't, is it, I believe it's, yeah, like you said, Fred, it's a pretty slow mode. I'm probably about 5-10 words a minute.
Oh, I don't know. I don't remember, but it's really slow. I avoid Olivia because it's too slow.
Yeah.
And also the thing is, since the mode is slow, when you're sending a lot of power with Olivia, your radio is going to run very, very hot quickly because it's a 100% duty cycle. When you want to say, hello, how are you doing? I am in California, blah, 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 blah. It takes a long time to send that message. It's going to be reliable. It's going to be, the person at the other end will be able to decode that signal, even though they cannot hear it. But it means your radio, when you're transmitting, is going to run hot, very hot at some, if you're not careful.
Yeah. When I was running PSK31 in general, with a 100-watt radio, I would scale it back down to about 30 watts. And that gives you some buffer that if you're transmitting a lot, you're not heating it up and risking damaging your radio. PSK31, it has a higher bit rate than Olivia, and so I can type just slightly faster than what PSK31 can send, which is probably why a lot of people do use macros with PSK31, is because if you're not a fast typer and you're sending a lot of, you're sending data fairly fast, then you would need something to be able to, type really fast. So Olivia, I'll play the little sound clip for that. All right, so the very first, actually, I don't think this is necessarily the very first, but the one that really became popular probably 6-7 years ago was JT65. It was released in 2003 and just almost had like an exponential use from ham radio. Originally, it was not intended for HF radio, or at least not just, terrestrial HF radio to HF radio. It was more designed for troposcatter or Earth, or moon bounce is what they call it, where you're bouncing your signal off the moon. But a lot of hams said, hey, look, this is great for weak signal. It's low power. It has some error correction in it. So let's give it a try and make it so that I can sort of have the advantages of Morse code without having to learn it. The one downfall with JT65 is that each cycle of transmitting your message took 1 minute. So your computer would spend 1 minute transmitting, and then it would spend 1 minute receiving, and then 1 minute transmitting and 1 minute receiving. In a couple of slides, I'll kind of show you what a typical JT65 or FT8 exchange looks like. And an exchange is like a complete contact from, hi, this is me, how are you? Here's my information. And then they send the same thing. And then 73, thank you and goodbye. So JT65, one of on the very last line, messages are reliably received or not received at all, is true with JT65. So it's nice that you don't have to spend a lot of energy listening through your headphones trying to make out what the letters are. It's a digital mode, so it's really from computer to computer, and it can be a lot of fun. So these JT and FT8 digital modes, a lot of people really like them. A lot of people think it's more like watching paint dry on the wall. So it really kind of depends on what your goals are and what you think about digital modes. All right, so FT8 was released a few years ago, mid 2017. It's similar to JT65, but it's much faster with a 15-second transmit receive cycle. So what you had to spend 4 minutes to do in FT8 only takes 1 minute to do in, 4 minutes to do in JT65 only takes you 1 minute to do in FT8. The WSJTX software is free and it works for most of these types of modes. I guess one downfall or drawback to these digital modes is for FT8, there's a 13 character message limit. So that's pretty small. I mean, it's your call sign and their call sign, the person you're contacting, and then not much else. And it can be a little bit slower than even voice or CW communication. You can make a complete CW exchange in less than 10 seconds, sometimes 15 seconds, depending on what you want to transmit and receive. But FT8, even a very short exchange or complete contact can take more than a minute. And I'll just play what FT8 sounds like. And you can tell by compared to the other modes that the tone shifts aren't as fast, which kind of reflects the fact that in that 15 seconds, technically it's like 12 seconds, you're only transmitting 13 characters. So here is a typical exchange for both JT65 and FT8. You have 13 characters maximum. The general message goes the format goes to, so your call sign if I'm transmitting to you, my call sign if it's coming from me, and your message. So I may call CQ. So CQ and then from is CQ meaning I'm calling anybody. And then from is K2MAX, and then I will include my grid square. My grid square down in San Francisco was CM87. Then if somebody calls me back, let's say W7MF, they call me back and they want to have an exchange with me, then they would transmit who they're transmitting to, which is me, because they're responding, and then from W7MF, and then their grid square. So in this particular exchange, the only piece of information, right, that they're actually exchanging besides their own call sign is their grid square. So then I would reply back to W7MF from K2MAX a -12, and that is the decibel of the signal. Not to get too complicated, but the higher the decibel number, and most of the time in these particular modes, they're going to be a negative number, but the higher, meaning -1 is higher than -12, is a better signal. So he's telling me that my signal that I'm transmitting, he can hear at his station at a -7 or -12 rather. And then I'll do the same. So I will say, actually, I apologize. So he will say K2MAX from W7MF, R, which means I received your last message, and here is my signal report, which is -8. And then the next exchange will be to W7MF from K2MAX, RRR, which means Roger, Roger, Roger. I received all your messages just fine. And then he will send to me 73, which is a ham radio way of saying thank you. A lot of people use it for goodbye. And then he would send the same thing, or I would send the same thing rather. And that is a complete exchange. Not a lot of information being sent. So in total, we both exchanged grid squares, we both exchanged signal reports, and we both exchanged pleasantries of 73. And then on the bottom there, you can see and I took a screenshot of just the message area between the two stations and what it looks like. So I'll stop here. Any questions, comments?
Comment.
Yeah.
With FT8, there is a way to make it one less step during the exchange, and that's in the application. You can double click on the radio button next to where it has the Roger, 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 and change it to Roger, Roger 73, so that you're sending your 73 right away. One less step.
Now it's the default. It's the default now. They all do that automatically.
Yep. So anything to kind of exchange more information more quickly. So it sounds like that's a great step that they took to reduce the amount of time that then it takes to confirm that you received all the information and give the best regards pleasantry. So as you can guess, and I don't know if I have a slide. If you remember, I talked PSK31 used macros. So once you made an exchange, you could push a button and it would send out the weather. And then you would push another button and it would send out information about your radio gear and things like that. FT8 is also a macro type driven exchange or mode. But really, there's a lot more that's automated. So in fact, a lot of people, most people, I would say, when they are using FT8, all they have to do is look for a station that's calling CQ, double click on it, and then your computer takes over from there. And it will send a message, and then wait to receive a message, and then automatically send the next message, wait to receive it. You could technically not supposed to, but you could go make a snack and come back and it would do everything for you. So I've just got a couple more slides. Paktor is another mode that has been around for a while, for a good 30 years. And there are different kinds. There's Paktor 1 through 4. These are more used to send messages such as the National Traffic System, the ARRL National Traffic System, or ARRL radiograms. WinLink also uses it to transfer large files. You can, Paktor 1 through 3, you don't necessarily need a modem. It can be done in software. Paktor 4, though, is proprietary, and SCS, which is the company that created and released Paktor, makes you buy their Paktor 4 modem if you want to use it. So it is a popular digital mode, but I don't think that a lot of people use it for things like contesting and things like that.
It's used for emergency.
Yep.
Email. Or if you're a sailor, you're in the middle of the ocean and you want to send emails, you can use Paktor.
Yeah, it can be very useful for people who are out at sea who aren't subscribed to some type of satellite phone with lots of minutes on it. So we talked a little bit about WSJTX. It was written by Joe Taylor in 2001. And like I said, it was used initially for moon bounce, meteor scatter, ionospheric scatter, but the modes that it created, FT8, JT65, they are now very popular for just general ham radio operators who are making contacts throughout the world. And Fred, you said you were going to do a demo?
Of FLDG, and I can do a demo of FT8 also.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be good, because probably a demo would be better than trying to explain what this looks like. So finally, if you want to find out more information, I would say YouTube is probably one of the best places to learn more or get in-depth information about FT8 or any of the other digital modes. However, there are a couple of books that the ARRL publishes. One is Get on the Air with HF Digital, and the other one is JT65 and JT9. I think that there's probably an update out there for that. But that
the problem with the book is, you know, by the time they're released, they're out of date, because the digital world is moving a lot faster than, you know, the book publishers.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was just amazing to me how FT or JT65 came out. It was really popular, and then all of a sudden in 2007, it's like, oh wait, there's another mode out that everybody wants to switch to.
Can I share my screen?
Yeah.
So this is, can you see the screen?
Yep.
So this is FLDG. You see some, you know, here you see the signal I'm decoding right now. You see someone calling CQ. It's a N5EYS. I started the software when we started the meeting. So you see, I've been jumping around. So you see some example of exchange the people are doing. So I started at the radio club when at college at the University of Arkansas, for example, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's the, you know, people calling CQ. That's the thing I've been decoding. So those decode their PSK. So you see the mode here is PSK 31, but there is a Olivia also. There's different modes. So now I'm going to show you how it works basically. So I choose a, you know, a frequency where there is no one. I'm going to go here, and I want to call. I'm not calling CQ because I don't want someone to answer. But let's say I want to answer to Max. Max has been calling CQ, and I answer to Max. This is my signal, and this is what I'm transmitting here, and that's the buffer. You know, where I can type back to you, Max, for example. Oops, Max. And that's what is been sent to on the air. So when I click on it, those things are just macros. So if I click, oops, here is my macro. It's just you know, TX. I turn on the transmit. I wait you know, 1/10 of a second. Then I send my call. No, the call from my call. That's how a macro looks like. I'm going to show you a more complex macro. For example, that one is brag. So that's a macro where I explain my station. Oops. So here's the macro. Oops, sorry. So for this QSO, I am using an ICOM IC72, blah, 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 0.25 kilowatt of power. That's it's going to put here, instead of my you know, antenna, is going to put what antenna I'm using, is going to put the version of the software I'm using running on macOS, and that's how macro looks like. And when I click on brag, that's the text that's going to be sent. I can show you, for example, different mode. So this. So you've seen a PSK, but I can, so the modes I'm using is domino. So that's an example of how domino looks like. So I'm going to stop the transmission. I'm using Thor, kind of a little bit similar. So that's Thor. Modes like domino, Thor, MFSK, and Contestia, one of the big advantages they have, so I'm going to stop there. One of the big advantages they have is they have a forward error correction. So that's why they're very, very efficient when there is noise, because the receiver is capable of correcting errors in the message that is receiving. And FT8 also does an error forward correction, so that's why FT8 is so efficient. I usually use a Thor or a domino because they're as, you know, close in terms of efficiency. They're as close as Olivia, but they are maybe twice or 3 times faster than Olivia. And it's their rack shoe mode. So basically when you call with those modes, the people they're expecting you to share, not just send macros. People are sending macro on PSK because the main reason I think is because PSK is way faster than all the other modes, and a lot of people, they don't type fast on the computer, and they don't like to. You see, sometimes when you start to rack showing with someone, they type super fast, and at some point they start typing, with 2 fingers, and you can see 1 character after each other because they want to rack show with you, but they're not good typists. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to switch software and start WSJT.
Which was the first software?
FLDG.
Oh, okay, FLDG.
So basically, FLDG, if you want to do any modes like RTTY, PSK, Olivia, Contestia, I mean, on FLDG, you may have 15 or 20 modes, and some modes also, because you have on Olivia or Contestia or Thor, or even PSK, you have PSK 31, 63, 125, etc., etc. And it's they use more bandwidth, and usually they are faster also. For example, PSK 31 is very popular, but in Europe they use a lot of PSK 125 because it's way faster. They just send macro, and they just click on the macro and they do an exchange, and it's pretty. I mean, you do an exchange pretty quickly. It's hard to actually on those modes because you don't have time. Even if you're a very good typist on PSK 125, you won't be able to keep up. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so that's, I'm going to go to 40 meter. So that's WSJT on FT8 on 40 meters. So that's the, you can see the screen. Oh no, you cannot see the screen, sorry. Here, you can see the screen. So you have all the signals right now. So you can see there is a lot of people even on 40 meters, there is a lot of people. FT8 is very, very popular. So I'm going to choose a frequency that is free. So I'm going to go here. Oh no, there is someone. It's hard to find a spot that is not crowded. And now I can call CQ. So to call CQ, I just enable transmit. So it's going to wait for the next sequence because it's by 15-second sequence. So now I'm sending the CQ. You see where I am in the 15-second sequence, and that's all I have to do. I just have to wait for someone to answer my call. So now it's listening to after I send a CQ, it's going to listen for 15 seconds. And you see on the left side, you see all the signal that has been decoded on that entire bandwidth. So all the conversation running right now, and me calling CQ. So I'd like to have someone reply to my CQ. So to show you an exchange. So here someone is replying to me. It's KG7WOC. So it's receiving I'm receiving a signal with minus 19 dB, which is pretty bad. I mean, pretty low. I am sending minus 19. W7 is where you are. So now I didn't receive this answer, so I'm trying again to send the same message until either of us give up, or the software gives up, or I decide to or it replies to me. So right now you see another signal that is on the same spot here. So that's why you see those messages running. So probably we're stepping on each other too. So that's why you cannot decode, because it's already receiving me with a very a weak signal. And you see here, it's very red, orange. That's because there is a lot of signal on the same spot. So I can give up and say, okay, you reply to me. So now I have my logging window. So click OK, the message is logged. So we did an exchange. So I didn't have to do anything. And it's going to reply the 7.3. Here's the 7.3. We have an exchange. And like someone was saying before, now the Roger 7.3 is all the it's the default one now. It's the new version of the software. That's the how they're doing it. They remove one of the exchange. Any questions?
Yes, Fred, a couple of them. One, does the software pick up the signal strength directly from the radio and put it right into that message, or do you have to manually intervene?
No. It's not picking up from the radio. It's picking up from his audio from the audio card. So it's not a strength. It's the strength of the signal compared to the noise.
Okay, thanks. And could you comment on the using multiple Rogers? It's Roger. What's the significant? Yeah,
that's because I said, okay, that guy I sent 3 times minus 19, and he was not replying. And then I click here for go back to call CQ. And when I click here, then after I saw he just replied. So I click on the reply to not call CQ but to reply.
So
here you see I was while we were talking, we had a new exchange. You have I call CQ, that guy K7ENN CN85 replied minus 12. I reply with minus 0.5. Roger. Now it's in the log, and it's going to send the 7.3.
So it's concatenating a series of Roger messages. Is that how you get multiples?
No, it's just one exchange here.
One exchange with 2 Rogers.
No, RR is it's not multiple. It's you'll see people who are doing CW. They go even on phone. If Max is calling me and he says something to me, I'm gonna reply, "Hey, Roger, Max," and then continue the conversation. It's just there is not. It's just on one reply, and there's 2 Rogers.
Okay.
Yeah, the number of Rogers, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Unless you're talking to Roger, then it would be Roger.
Yeah,
we've been there and done that. Yeah.
Thanks for the QSO, Fred.
Yeah, no problem. So is that you?
Yeah, that was me.
Okay, cool. I have you in the log now. So to be frank, I don't like FT8. It's a mod where, like Max said before, it's like watching pen dry. And now they force people to click more than before. When the first release of FT8 came out, it was like a JT65. You didn't have to click anywhere. It was when you were calling CQ and you are a pileup, it was picking up one of the reply automatically and doing all those things automatically. And I like to rack shoe. I like to play with things. And yeah, I was doing Exchange with FT8, but after an hour, I was kind of bored. But now I'm having fun with FT8 because I'm writing a software that completely it's an automatization software on top of JT65. So now now I'm listening for all the CQs, and my software, analyze all these people calling CQ and try to do statistical analysis on the signal and the distance, etc., to pick up the signal where I have most of the chances of making the QSO. And I'm trying to do that for the next field day, where I'm trying to optimize the number of QSO we can make during a field day. So I'm having fun, not with FT8 or with WSJT. I'm having fun developing that software right now. And as an example, also on my software, I said, okay, I want to do contact only people that are not in the US. So I told my software to reply to any CQ coming from outside the US. And in 3 days, I had 10 more countries in my log by doing that. I didn't do anything. It's just a software, picking a signal, trying to see which one is the best, has the best chance of making the contact, and just contacting those. It's a highly automatic software. I have to, and I'm borderline on the legality of the thing, because you're not supposed to have things that are fully automatic. So when I do that, I watch my computer, I watch my radio, make sure everything is working fine. So I'm here, but it's I don't know. I'm playing with fire.
So for field day, you're saying that the software will kind of optimize where the signals are coming from, like what areas, so that you're able to then try to contact other people in those same areas.
On the left window, you have all the contact, all the exchanges that are being made. And when you're someone called CQ, you see 5, 10 CQ, and what you do, you pick one, you click on that one, and you hope the contact is going to be made. So what my software does is takes all the 10 CQ, look at the signal report, the distance, the azimuth, what direction they're coming from, and try to pick up the one where I'm going to have more, the highest chance of making the contact out of those 10. And it's going to contact this one first. And then when this one is done, it's going to listen again for all the CQ coming. So you're going to have 10 or 12 or 8, and then pick up the one that has the strongest chance of making the contact.
That's great. And so as I understand that the newer WSJTX, they allow you to queue or have a queue of contacts that you want to make.
That's for the expeditions.
I'm sorry, for what?
The expeditions.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So
yeah,
on the expedition mode, you can make 5 contacts at the same time. Up to 5 contacts at the same time, but you cannot do that if you are not in the expedition. You cannot use that mode, or if you're in the contest, you cannot do that.
Nice. Well, as you can imagine, if you're receiving all of these signals from all over, like you're not just receiving, you have the ability to receive 10, 20 signals all at once, and these signals could be coming from all over. So the other aspect of digital modes, which we haven't really covered and don't have time to cover, is just looking at propagation. And that's what Whisper and some other modes allow you to do. And also, when you couple it with the internet, you're able to see where your signal could potentially go, where other people's signals are coming from.
So I can show you something about that. Let me find it. So can I share my screen again?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Safari. So can you see Safari?
Not yet.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to click share. Here. So I built a 80-meter NVIS antenna, and I wanted to see how far that antenna could make contact. So it's just sitting on the top of my fence. It's not very high. It's a pretty inefficient antenna for 80 meters. So then, using Whisper, I drew graphs like that where I have the distance in kilometers and the time of day where for the time of day, which distance I was capable of making. So here's another representation of that distance. So you see when I at different time of during the 24-hour period, at different times I can do different distances. And so here's the contact I made on a map, and here is on the azimuth drawing, me being in the middle, I could make those contacts. The bigger the dot, the more contacts I was making. So on 80 meter, there is not a lot of people running Whisper, but that's the kind of analysis I could do on that antenna. I did that for my 20, for my, all my antennas. And one more thing I did with FT8 Whisper, I mean, is I wanted to see where all the arms are. So I took all the database, all the contacts from Whisper. So you have a website where everyone is sending their contacts. I took all the contacts made in 1 month, and I put that on the map. And you see, most of the people are on the East Coast. They're in Europe. You don't have a lot of people in Australia. So here's the map of the US where, the hotspot where the people are. So you see, Washington and Portland all the way here. You see California, that's Texas, and then you have the East Coast. And in Europe, that's where the majority of the ham radio operators are concentrated. That's for, that's for Australia. So no surprises here. There's no one in the middle, and that's for South America, and that's on 1 month. So you need to do that for several months if you want to have a more accurate representation. So that's the kind of thing the thing you can do. You can use Whisper for.
Yeah, it's amazing what kind of information, when you have the internet that's able to collect all the information from all these different stations around the world. What kind
Whisper is a great tool. I use that not all the time, but every time I build an antenna I use my antennalyzer to see what is the resonant frequency of my antenna, the SWR, how I can match that antenna correctly to be efficient, and then I use a Whisper to see how efficient is my antenna, how far I can go, and I have it gives me the people who are receiving my signal. I know with what power I send. I usually send with 200 milliwatts, and I'm people on the East Coast are receiving me with 200 milliwatts, and I have this in dB the signal to noise ratio. So then I can see if my antenna is working or well or not. I can do a modification and see if I change the antenna how that's going to affect the signal.
And so you're making contacts from the West Coast to the East Coast?
With a Whisper, on good days to the world.
Okay. Yeah, with 1/5 of a watt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's one of the exciting things about digital. You certainly couldn't do that with voice, or if you tried to do it, it might become very frustrating very quickly. Anybody have any questions about digital, or we can open it up to anything ham radio?
I'd like to throw one out there, please.
Yeah.
So I'm very much interested in FT8, and I would like to know if you could post a link to those heat maps that you were shown, and it looked like at the bottom it said you had altered a Python script So is this something that we would be able to do ourselves, or maybe like one Thursday before the meeting for like an hour or something? We could play FT8 since we're near like West Coast. So for new people anyways,
So
having a helper might help.
the
Sorry, go ahead.
the Python script is for the maps, but not for FT8, is for Whisper. And everything I do is either on my blog or on GitHub.
Because that's the first time I've seen those maps. And that's really interesting. I've heard the word Whisper before. So maybe once I sit down and get my antenna built and turn my G90 on and give it a try, it'll make a little bit more sense probably. But it sounds like I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions over the next couple of months.
So I'm putting a link on my on the chat for the blog, so you can read experiments and things I'm doing, and then every piece of code I write is on GitHub. Even the thing that completely automates FT8, you can get the code. There is not a lot of documentation right now. There is the thing is not fully working, but there is bits and pieces, but it's already on GitHub.
And Stevie, one of the great things about FT8 is it looks complicated and complex, but it even from just somebody starting from the beginning, it would only take you a couple hours to actually start making contacts. There's a lot of work that's, especially the software, just makes it super easy to get up and running. Probably the hardest part, the two hardest parts would be, connecting your computer to your radio. But even that's not that difficult, especially if you go with either a radio that has the interface built into it, or if you just buy an off-the-shelf interface. The second part is going to be just all the settings that you have to set up in the software. But even that isn't as difficult as it seems. Once you get everything set up like that, making contacts, you'll be working tens, if not hundreds, of stations once you get set up.
If you have a radio with an audio interface, it's going to be super easy. The radio and the computer, they're going to do everything automatically for you. If you are using an external sound card, like the Signal Link or those sound cards, you see knobs on the front, and where you need to tune the delay, you need to tune the audio input levels and things like that. And the people, they have a tendency to put those knobs too high. So that saturates the signal, and they're having hard time to make contacts because they're because of the saturation of the signal. So they cannot make contacts, and everyone around you is going to hate you because you're going to kind of blank out their their signal, and they will have also a hard time. So it's the most difficult thing to I mean, it's not that difficult. You need to be careful, that's all, to not to transmit too loud, that's all.
I got a quick question, Fred. So the software you were running, was that WSJT? That was just download that software?
Yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got one. Did you guys talk about JS8 call at all?
No.
Has anybody played with that one?
I played a little bit with JS8 call. So JS8 call is someone who developed a software. So the problem with FT8 is like it's all automatic. The messages are all pre-formatted. You cannot drag shoe or say anything with FT8. And someone developed on top of the FT8 protocol a way to send messages. So you can have a kind of a rack shoe with a JS8 call, like on Olivia, but it's Olivia is slow. JS8 is even slower than Olivia. FT8, you make a quick exchange because it sends very, very short messages. They're pre-formatted, and in 1 minute you make a contact. But when you try to start to rack shoe, it's really, really slow. So people who do emergency, or people who travel, neck of the woods where there is no one, they want to have a way to be able to contact someone in in an emergency. They kind of like JS8 call for that reason. But yeah, it's really slow.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because that's what kind of pulled me in, was I got stuck at a park and had no way to post the spot for POTA. And then on the way home, anyway, I ended up finding out about JS8 call, and there's a way on there to post your spot automatically.
Yeah, but for that you have macros and it's very short messages. But you don't really RecShoe on JS8 call.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I've seen a few people sort of kind of talk, but yeah, a couple of times I've tried it, I haven't gotten very good results. Maybe I have the gain turned up too much or something. Too much.
If you want to have a conversation with someone, if you want to really talk with someone, try PSK. There is a lot of macro, but you're gonna have people coming back to you. But try Thor, try Domino, try those modes with their forward error correction. You're gonna have a good quality signal exchange, not a lot of mischaracter. And then the people who are using those modes is because they like to RecShoe, because that's what they are looking for and that's what they want. And then you can have a discussion with someone. It doesn't have to be a 2-hour discussion. It can be a 10 minutes discussion, but it's kind of fun to do that. One of my problem with FT8 is you spend 2 hours doing FT8, you're gonna have 30, 50 contacts, and at the end, you have no idea who you made a contact with. You don't know the call sign. You can make a contact with Japan without even noticing you're making a contact with Japan. It's when I go on Thor, for example, I talk to someone I know, his name is Mike. I know he lives in Canada somewhere. I know he spent the weekend painting his fence. He has a dipole antenna, and I know his radio. I feel like I made a connection with someone. And the funny thing is, 2-3 days after, I called the guy again, and he remained, he said, "Hey, Fred, welcome back." We made a connection. You can contact one guy 10 times on the same day on FT8. Neither of you gonna remember that you made 5 times the same contact during the same day. Sorry about, I don't like FT8. I think it's been clear now.
There's some new things happening on the internet in regards that might address your concerns there, Fred.
So what do you mean?
So every Thursday, and that's why I was trying to advocate that we do it, but like right before our meeting, every week. That's why I'm sometimes like 10 minutes late. We have, we're calling it a sprint because we can't call it a contest. But a lot of us YouTubers and then people in the community will get together and we'll all do FT8 at the same time. And we're calling it the FT8 off or the sprint. And I can try, I don't know if I know how to send links, but you could definitely email me about it. You guys would have a blast. These guys are old computer guys and gals, and they're really into ham radio. And then some of them are into the FT8. And it kind of gamifies it. And, you get to talk a little bit of smack and the winner gets a good on you at the end or whatnot. But it's kind of cool.
Yeah,
but we would totally win if we grouped together.
But you are, all the conversation is on the internet. It's not on FT8.
This is correct. Yeah, that's true. But we live stream either on Temporarily Offline's channel or the Ham Radio Dudes channel every Thursday. And I think you guys might really enjoy it. I'd love to see you guys there.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's always interesting when people find, because I'm kind of with Fred, like you can certainly get your DXCC and your worked all states and a whole bunch of awards on FT8, but the challenge, there's not really a lot of challenge to it versus like doing the same in Morse code or doing it with 5 watts or less on voice. But everybody has their own likes and dislikes. But it's always interesting to find out like if there is a problem. Like Fred and I kind of both agree, it's like watching paint dry. That there are other people out there thinking, well, how can we make it better?
But like you said before, it depends on the goal. Some people they have it has been a long standing goal to have a DXCC 100, for example. And there is some country that are hard to make, especially right now where you don't have the propagation. And they go on FT8 and they don't care. They just want to have someone someone from those countries in the log, or someone wants to work, all states. They go and they have their all state pretty quickly. But the thing is, when 20 years ago, when someone was working all state on SSB, I think it was more challenging, to show more, patience than just working all state in FT8. I read stories of people working all state in less than 2 weeks. The challenge is not the same. I think the ARRL, they're realizing that because they want to, for example, the digital, they have the digital contest. So digital is mainly RTTY, and the people are starting to use FT8 instead of RTTY to make that contest, and they, the people using FT8, they had the advantage over RTTY, and I think what the ARRL realized is that there's a problem here. And now they said they're going to have the digital contest is going to be RTTY only. And then they're going to have a special contest for FT8. But to make it more challenging, they're going to, on the points, they're going to factor the distance also. So they're going to be the number of contacts, but they're going to factor the distance. So the farther you're going to make contacts, the more points you're going to have, et cetera, et cetera. So to make it more challenging.
Yeah. And really, that's kind of why they, have different classes. Like, for example, the Field Day, probably one of the more popular, unofficial contests. They have, the QRP class or the high power station contest or class. So it's like everybody can kind of enjoy the same contest, but with different challenging levels. Cool. Anybody else have any questions?
No, thank you for the information and sharing so much. Stevie,
Yeah,
thanks for posting that link.
I got the link on the YouTube channel.
Okay, this is Dave Burley. Can you guys hear me?
Hey, Dave. You're pretty quiet, but I can hear you.
Sorry, quick question. I'm thinking about getting my first radio, and I've been seeing these ads on Amazon for like a $37 radio. And I'm thinking, how bad can it be? I can always, for 37 bucks, I can always throw it away later. But do you guys have any recommendations on first radios and where to get them?
Yes.
Yeah, you want to go ahead, Fred?
Go ahead first.
So yeah, every amateur radio, whether you do it now or later, will eventually buy, one of the cheap Chinese radios. Nothing wrong with it. They're not well built. I think they're getting better, but I had 2 recently that I had loaned out to people that they both kind of stopped working within a matter of weeks. So they're more of a disposable radio, and you definitely wouldn't want to use it for emergency communications. The gold standard for kind of a first-time handheld radio would be like the FT60, or you could do the FT70. Those are the FT60 is kind of built like a tank. It is an older radio, but it has a lot of nice features that even some of the more expensive radios don't have. It's kind of a price versus value proposition too. So the FT60 is $150 I wouldn't cry too long if I, had lost it or dropped it. There are more expensive radios out there, $500–600. I probably wouldn't take that out anywhere. So the FT60 kind of fits that mid, to low level price, well-built radio that you could easily use with emergency communications. For a mobile radio, there are several options. You definitely want to get a dual band for both mobile and handheld. The ones that kind of come to mind for a mobile radio would be like the Kenwood V71A or a Yaesu FT400 or FTM 400. It's a slightly higher priced radio, but there are other lower radios. I think they have the FTM 100. Fred, do you have any others that you would suggest?
Yeah. So if I had to, that's the thing I'm telling every new that I meet. They ask me for a radio, and I say get a radio that is going to do digital as well. So, for example, the FT70D is the one that replaced the FT60D, 60, and it's $150. It's not super expensive, and it's it's dual band, and it's doing digital. So you're going to do exactly everything you're going to do with the the FT60 plus digital. It's a good radio. It's sturdy. It's it's a nice radio. If you don't want to spend that much, you can get the Yaesu. They have a nice radio, the 45 and the 65. They are only FM, no digital, but they're less expensive. If you want to go the Chinese radio, the Wuxun, I think it's pronounced. It's I need to look at the spelling. It's WOUXUN. They're the high-end Chinese radio, so they're good radio. It's not like the Baofeng and those things. They're very good radio. They have interesting features. For example, you can do dual monitoring. So if you want to do satellite, for example, that's a good option because you can talk on one band and receive on the other band at the same time as you are talking, and not all the radio are capable of doing that. So that's some interesting feature of those radio, and they are between $100 and less than $100 and $150, but they won't be digital. But if I were you, I would go digital, because if you take the FT60D, then if you are a tech and you want to talk to on the East Coast or in any state on California, if you want to talk to me, you will be able to do it with a digital radio, and not necessarily with a FM radio, FM only radio. And digital is the future. Digital is the future. Don't.
The FT70, it does analog also, so you wouldn't be missing out on anything if you were to buy the FT70.
Usually, all the radios that are digital, they do analog also. You may have some super expensive $700 Motorola radio that are only digital, but you shouldn't buy those things because they're very, very you need special software, special cable to program them. They're kind of a pain to program.
And the only other point I would say is if you always check prices. So if you're going to be shopping on Amazon or eBay, always check with Ham Radio Outlet, which is just hamradio.com, or there's a couple other specific, ham radio specific sites. Sometimes people will buy things and then put them up for sale on Amazon for twice the price for no good reason.
So one follow-up, I've noticed there's a lot of cell phones with ham capability. They're just hard to find right now because there's a real shortage of chips. And have any of you had any luck with those? Because that would be my preference, but a lot of them aren't even 5G. They're still 4G cells. So
you're talking about the RF finder?
Yeah, it's one of them. Yes.
Yeah, so
there's a bunch out there that claim to exist and don't.
So that's not really. I mean, it's not like it's not really like you're gonna have a radio and a cell phone all combined into one thing. It's gonna be a kind of dedicated to radio. It's mainly for DMR right now. The people who are using that, they're for DMR mainly. I don't even think they're capable of doing analog.
There's they're kind of a unique and it's a unique idea. I don't actually even know anybody that has one. They're fairly expensive. I think $700-800 to $1,000.
Yeah.
There are much better radios. I mean, the one thing that is nice about those particular radios is that the big screen, and you really don't have to program them because they can connect to the internet and they're self-programming essentially. But there's many other first radios I would buy besides that one.
Also, if you're interested in DMR, C4FM, those modes, you have apps that are running on your phone that can. They're not radios because you don't go over the air beside your Wi-Fi, but you can talk to people that are on radio on those C4FM and DMR network. It's like Echolink on your phone, for example.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Well, we are at the 7:30 mark. I want to thank everybody for joining, and I'm going to just share my screen real quick so that we can take a look at what's coming up. So I have 2 more topics on the list. Ham radio equipment reviews is going to be next week, and then something that I think is really fun to talk about is power poles. Power poles are connectors that a lot of people use in ham radio to kind of make connecting 12 volts universal. So stay tuned for that. And if you have any suggestions, comments, questions, please feel free to email them to me at max@nultra.com. If you have any topics that you'd like us to cover, please email me. I'm going to start filling out the rest of the year with topics. There's a couple that we missed in this year that I'll actually move down to the upcoming meetings.